Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and when our schedules align, other words that start with A, meaning we can all get together at the same place, kind of virtually at the same time, to talk about something we love very much, that, of course, being movies. Love talking film with some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos on the face of the planet. And let me introduce them to you, just in case you haven't yet had the pleasure. Jim Pugliafico is with us on the show this week. Hey, babe.
Hi, I'm here. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast.
And after that very enthusiastic hello, Will, I don't know how you're going to top that, but Will Lindis is here with us too. Welcome, Will.
Gee, guys, I'm so excited to be here. Hey, movie boys. Hey, movie girls. Let's do this thing. That works?
Nice.
Right?
Will, I'm totally picturing you. You saw the Avatar: The Last Airbender cartoon, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You know that episode where the Ember Island players like recreate the Avatar's journey?
Yes.
Yeah, you're totally giving me the actor for the Avatar from that.
Wasn't that like saying. 2 episodes, actually? It was over 2 or 3 episodes, but yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I would totally do that. I would do that. I would do a stage production of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Are you kidding me? Yeah, sign me up. I mean, because I look so much like Aang, right?
You totally do. Go Airbend! Totally do it.
That was good because that was awesome because it was so like self-aware and kind of poking fun at itself, and I enjoyed that segment of the show.
It's hard to pull off good like meta humor
parody, yeah,
because there's so much of it that is so like obnoxiously in your face that it's just sort of like, okay, I get it, you get it, we all get it. But yeah, that, Avatar is one of the ones that did it well.
Agreed. Well, it is so great to be back with you this week, guys. We were talking about this before the show started. We've got some pretty bad monsoon thunderstorms about to roll through Tucson. So it's entirely possible that Jim and I could be here and on the show and then suddenly disappear, just like the Avatar for 100 years. So if that happens, if we drop out, we'll be back as soon as we can. But guys, I have some exciting news that you already know, but a lot of our listeners may not. Where do you think I'm going with this?
I'm pretty excited to hear where you're going with this.
I know, and I'm still excited.
I think I just dropped a hint on it, but maybe you're going something different.
Well, the word here definitely lends itself toward the announcement. The Movie Bears podcast is now officially on Spotify. So if you aren't an iTunes podcast listener, if you're tired of listening through our website, if you don't like Stitcher Radio for some reason, Spotify is now your new home for the Movie Bears podcast. Of course, you can always catch up with us on YouTube, so you can see the video as well. But a lot of folks use Spotify for all of their podcast and music needs. So if, that's been a bit of a hurdle for you checking out the show, we're here on Spotify now, so be sure to check out that back catalog. I'm pretty pumped. I mean, as much as I love Apple Music, I'm a big Spotify fan as well, guys. So this is kind of exciting.
I think that one of the things that can be difficult is when you're consuming any type of medium or media, there's these hurdles, like these real life hurdles that get in the way of how you consume it, right? And I think that anywhere that we can put ourselves where we are more accessible to more listeners, I think that's just a net positive. Spotify, the big advantage over that is with YouTube, you're dealing with something where you have to kind of sit down and watch it, which is great because we love kind of the face-to-face stuff. With iTunes and Stitcher, it's more of like a download situation. And with our website, kind of the same thing. You're probably sitting down at our website, but hey, Spotify, you're already streaming some music. Let's just click over there, listen to the latest podcast, and dive back in.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's just a different angle and a different method of getting the content that you like. And hopefully you like us. And, it'll open up avenues to, friends that I know that listen to Spotify can, like you said, Will, just kind of click on over and listen to us without having to go through the whole download thing and, all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had some friends who really enjoy the show, but they're like, guys, why aren't you on Spotify yet? And well, now we are. So there you go.
Yeah, we were just waiting until episode 289 because that's the milestone, right? Like that's when you do it. That's what you're supposed to do, is what I'm gonna say.
Well, Jordan Riley in the chat. Hey, Jordan, good to see you. Says yes, he just listened to our Deadpool 2 show on Spotify. So, Jordan, very glad to hear you're already accessing the show via Spotify.
He's first to the, he's the first one I think that I've heard about that's actually found us on Spotify and has actually listened. I mean, that doesn't mean he's the first one, but he's the first one that has come to us and told us they found us on Spotify.
We'll say, first. We'll say first. He's the first to claim it.
Yeah.
He was the first one in the live chat to say that he listened on Spotify. So, Jordan, I think we have a Burger King crown around here somewhere that we'll put on your head when you come to visit.
Jim just needs to collect more of those prize winner hats for scenarios just like this.
There we go. Well, guys, we've got a big show this week. We've got not one, but two movies we're going to be reviewing. The first, of course, is Mission Impossible Fallout, starring Tom Cruise, Simon Pegg, and a whole bunch of other folks. We're also going to be talking about Studio A24's 8th Grade, which is a quieter movie. There are no fun motorcycle chases in 8th Grade, but some really interesting, cool stuff, maybe, question mark, that's worth talking about all the same. So no movie news this week. We may get back to that next week. But guys, are we ready to start talking about movies? Are you feeling in the mood?
I accept this mission.
Yes, I'm always ready. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
Well, let's not tempt fate, given the status of our power and internet connectivity there, Jim.
Although that totally needs to be your outro at the end of this episode, just like it's self-destruct in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then static. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a great idea. Jim, you got to remember that. And if you forget, you got to go back in and record it and edit it in later.
I'll make sure I get it. Don't worry about that.
All right. Well, then here we go. We'll kick things off with the first of our movie discussions. Before we jump into Mission Impossible Fallout, just a little public service announcement. If you're unfamiliar with the format of our show, we're going to be talking about both of these movies completely spoiler-free for probably 10 minutes or so. And then we'll give you a fair warning before we open the can of spoiler worms. So if you haven't seen one of the films, you can step away and protect your virginal innocence. We'll awkwardly ramble for a few moments to give you time to hit pause. If you're listening through digital tape delay via Spotify or iTunes, you can skip ahead. Otherwise, you listen at your own peril once we give that spoiler warning. So if you have not yet seen either of these films, you're on the fence, you want an opinion, we're happy to give it to you. Just, protect yourself if you care about spoilers. Anyway, all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Mission Impossible Fallout. All right, Jim, why are you laughing? What's going on?
Nothing. We were talking about spoilers, and I'm trying to think of, certainly there are ways we can spoil this latest Mission Impossible movie, but guys, the mission is not exactly impossible.
What?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Jim, okay, run the spoiler alarm.
I know what the title says, but. Yeah, we're on the 6th movie by now. If we've kind of figured out that these missions aren't quite as impossible as they might seem when they start.
Oh, goodness. Well, Jim, how about you give us the basic setup for this mission and whether you think it's worth seeing in theaters, waiting for rental, or skipping entirely?
Sure. So this one, Mission Impossible Fallout, is its name. Oh, it's Mission: Impossible - Fallout. That is the official name of the movie. I've been screwing it up the whole time I've been typing it, only using the colon and not the hyphen. But we'll fix that. Anyway, this is the 6th Mission Impossible movie in this series, I guess, coming after Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. And I'm sorry, Rogue Nation was the one before this, and Ghost Protocol was the one before that. And before that, it was like just 1, 2, and 3. All of them starring, of course, Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt. Ethan Hunt and the IMF team in this one joined forces with the CIA to prevent a disaster of epic proportions. A group of terrorists planned to use 3 plutonium cores for a simultaneous nuclear attack on the Vatican, Jerusalem, and Mecca, Saudi Arabia. Of course, big, huge religious sites. When the weapons go missing, Ethan and his crew find themselves in a desperate race against time to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. And there's your impossible mission. This one, I'm like a casual fan of the Mission Impossible series. I'm not what you would call a hardcore fan. I couldn't tell you, man, you get to the 6th one and they all kind of start to blur together. I don't want to give too many spoilers away. Well, it's in the trailer, but some of the same, a lot of the same characters are in this one. Of course, as far as the cast goes, we've got Henry Cavill in this one. He's a new guy that shows up. Then we've got some familiar faces. We've got Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg. We got Rebecca Ferguson. We've got Angela Bassett showing up again. She was in the first in the previous one. In this one, we've even got Wolf Blitzer that shows up. So there you go. So yeah, I mean, this one, this is a really well done Mission Impossible movie. This movie is almost 2.5 hours long, but it really doesn't seem that long to me anyway. It didn't seem that long. This movie is jam-packed with one action set piece after another. Some of them are like absolutely spectacular, and even the ones that aren't spectacular are pretty darn good. I mean, so there aren't too many sour notes in this movie, and I think the movie does itself a lot of favors by staying away from a lot of dramatic scenes and going full on action scenes, whether it's helicopter chases, motorcycle chases, foot races, shootouts. This movie's got all that going for it. So I think this is definitely a see it kind of movie. If you're going to see any of the Mission Impossible movies, this one is probably the best one so far. And I don't think you have to know a ton about. The funny thing is, there's 6 movies in, and you would think, oh my God, if I haven't seen, the first 5, I'm going to be totally lost. I don't think that's the case here. I think the movie, the way it's put together, structured, and written, all you need to know is that Tom Cruise is a member of IMF. He's this, there's going to be a lot of spy action, a lot of just plain, good guy versus bad guy when you don't know who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. This one does it really well. You don't have to be really steeped in the history of what has come before to enjoy this movie. I think this is a fun ride. I think most people will enjoy this. It's a thumbs up for me.
All right. So definitely a big recommend from Jim. And Jim, thanks so much for walking us through your thoughts on why. Will, how about you? Did that resonate with your experience with the film? What do you think?
Yeah, so when you're talking about a film like Mission Impossible Fallout, you have to judge it based on what it is and not what it isn't, because not all films are all things or are trying to accomplish all things. So if you're going to this film looking for complex interpersonal dynamics, dramatic character growth, riveting dialogue, anything along those lines, you're not going to get it. But the thing is that doesn't matter, because that's not what this film is about. the Mission Impossible series is about pulpy spy action with this kind of predictable team, and that, you know, we've gotten to the point in these films where we know who our team members are, and they each fill a very specific role within that team. And of course, heart-pounding action. And when you look at it with those criteria, Mission Impossible Fallout is one of the best action films that we've had in a long time. I'm sort of with you, Jim, in that a lot of the I guess the backstory of this franchise is sort of lost on me. I've seen all of them, but I can tell you that I didn't like the first two. And then somewhere along the lines, I think it was maybe like 3 or 4, like they started getting kind of good. And now we get this one. And this is a fantastic action flick. The movie it's not nonstop stunts, but even when it isn't, there's always a sense of urgency as they're going to the next thing. They're moving to the next scene. They're moving through this conversation so they can get the piece of information so that they can get rid of the MacGuffin or whatever it is that's happening. Once the plot of this movie kicks in within the first 2 minutes or so of the film, like your heart doesn't stop racing until like the final moments of the film. That's what you want out of an action film. So this is definitely a watch. This is watch it on the biggest screen with the best sound system possible. Have your popcorn, grab your soda, and just buckle in, because this is a hell of a ride with just stunt piece after stunt piece. I think we're probably going to be spending a lot of time talking about Henry Cavill on this podcast, who shows up just absolutely gorgeous and just rocking this like awesome stash, which, if you guys remember, was one of the sticking points in Justice League, because they had to like go in and CGI that mustache out, and his lip looked really weird in that movie. Well, this is why, and it almost makes it worth it, because he looks so fucking good in this. Mission Impossible Fallout is an absolute must watch. It does everything that it sets out to do flawlessly.
Wow, so 2 big recommends. Man, I'm gonna say for me, I fall 85% in line with you guys. This was a fun ride. I like this movie a lot. As the Mission Impossible films go, I think, definitely over the last few years, they have gotten better. I think I like the last one better than this one by about 12% or so. Arbitrary number, I know, but that was probably because of the Nessun Dorma scene, which I thought was just masterfully done. But this was a great ride. I think at this point it's getting a little predictable, though, and part of that is because you're 6 movies in, so like it's hard to kind of keep you guessing. But I think the other thing is, Jim, you mentioned this movie was like 2.5 hours long. It didn't feel too long to you. As much as I love you, I have to disagree. This felt too long to me. This felt like we could have taken 25 or 30 minutes out, not even necessarily from like the action stuff. Sometimes they're just, sitting around talking in between action pieces, and it's good to have a little bit of a reset, but like, let's have Simon Pegg do Simon Pegg stuff. Let's have Ving Rhames do Ving Rhames stuff. Like, that's good, but I guess for me, you kind of got to find like more of a balance. If you're going to have all these great, awesome, amazing stunt action pieces that make the movie as bloated as it is, I think those character moment pieces have to really feel earned to connect those and make those work. And for me, I was just kind of like, okay, can we just get through Alec Baldwin's really bad acting so we can get on to the next like action piece, please? I don't know how you balance that. Ron in the chat, who also agreed with you on Henry Cavill's sexiness. Ron says, I thought it felt like 30 minutes too long. Some of the scenes dragged. And so, Ron, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely right there with you as well. I think some of that, just like my rumblings right now, could probably be cut for time and coherency, and things would probably still be okay. There you go. But I mean, that's really my only main complaint with the film, is it just did run kind of long. When we were getting ready to go see this movie, we were going with some friends, and one of them asked, well, how long is the movie? Like an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes? And Jim's like, oh no, it's 2.5 hours long. And I'm just like, what? Are you kidding me? Like a 2.5 hour action movie. For the most part, I didn't notice the time going by. There's just a few spots where it does kind of drag on. I gotta say, Henry Cavill was a big shining light in this movie for me. I won't lie, in the bathroom scene that's in the trailer, you know that part where like you see him take his jacket off and he's got like back sweat like under his shoulder blades?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a little wood like in that scene.
Oh, God.
Like, oh my man, holy crap! Like he's so hot, and then there's water spraying everywhere, and he's getting wet, and I'm just
You're
like,
imagining public bathroom sex. Come on.
oh man, I'm like Henry Cavill showers.
We'll talk about
me.
that too. Remind me to talk about that.
Wait, to talk about that scene or to talk about public bathroom sex?
Both.
Oh, okay, I get what you're talking about.
Why not both? But if you're on the fence about this one and you like a good action movie, I would definitely recommend you go see it. One thing I did want to ask you guys real quick before we move into spoilers, I've talked to no less than 3 people in the last day alone who said they won't go see these movies because Tom Cruise is a terrible actor who should be put out to pasture. And I asked them, what was the last Tom Cruise movie you saw? And they're like, oh, it was like Jerry Maguire back in the 2000s or whatever. So like, do you guys feel like there's some truth to that? I mean, is Tom Cruise really like done, or has he still got it?
Well, I mean, it depends what you're talking about. I think a more fair question is, what was the last movie that Tom Cruise actually acted in? You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have to do a lot here. I mean, let me take that back. He does a lot. He carries these movies as an action star that he has to be for this role, and he does it very well, I think. So yes, from that perspective, I would say yes, of course he does. But if you're looking for any kind of like real like emotional performance, and this is where the weaknesses start to show, and I'm not saying it's necessarily his chops or his fault. To be fair, every single dramatic moment in this movie didn't really work, because I don't know if it's just the acting or the characters are just playing more like caricatures instead of real people. So, but yeah, so he didn't really have to act here. I'd like to see him, maybe I would go see him try to do something, a little bit more dramatic, a little bit, a little bit different than, was it Jack Reacher that he did also? Is that right?
Yep.
And this role, it's basically the same character, doing just in a different titled movie. So he's still got it. If you put him in Mission Impossible movies until he can't move anymore, it'll probably work.
Which will probably be soon, because I mean, this dude does like all of his own stunts. Like Cruise has a death wish, right? Like at some point, like he's gonna jump off that building or fly through that airplane or like crash that helicopter, whatever it is. Like there's so many things that he does that, and obviously it's like a lot of computers and stuff in there and a lot of safety harnesses and stuff, but he does the work of a stuntman as well as that of an actor, and that's commendable. Like, look, like I get that there's people who have a bad taste in their mouth for a specific actor for some reason or another. Like we all have tastes, some people like broccoli, some people hate Brussels sprouts, whatever it is. Right. And I think to a lot of people, Tom Cruise, no matter what he does, he will always be the dude jumping up and down on the couch. Like, I think that that image of Tom Cruise as kind of the crazy man on, what was it, on Oprah, just like, I love this woman, like that whole scene. And then kind of the ties to Scientology and all of that. Like, I think those things are so ingrained with people's perception of Tom Cruise that I don't think he can shake those. And that's fair because we all have those little biases. But Tom Cruise is, as Jim mentioned, like, his strength is not in heavy dramatic performances. Probably the last time I've seen him really stretch in a role was probably like 2008's Tropic Thunder, where he had like a small role, but it was one where he got to kind of play this like kind of greasy slime ball like agent dude in like heavy prosthetics, like it was, since then, so that's a decade of just Oblivion, Edge of Tomorrow, like all these Mission Impossible movies. You mentioned the Reacher movies. Like it's basically Tom Cruise running to explosions or Tom Cruise running from explosions. And the thing is that I don't think it for me matters what his dramatic chops are, like how well he can
Right.
deliver that monologue, because those aren't the movies he's being cast in. He's being cast in movies where you need to look awesome while running to or from those explosions, and I think he does that very, very well. So I don't even know that I would agree that I want to see him stretch anymore. I think that this is a dude who is very comfortable and very successful doing a specific type of thing, and I think he can probably ride that out until he eventually injures himself.
Let Cruise be Cruise, I suppose, or just let him be on cruise control, to use a really bad pun, through another 10 years of these movies. We'll have to see when he slows down. Top Gun 2 is coming down the pipeline. I'm a little curious about that. We'll see. But we have a lot of spoilerific content we probably want to discuss. So, guys, are you ready to do that? Are we good to go with opening up spoilers?
Spoilers we can talk about, sure.
All right. Well, then, for those of you who have not yet seen Mission: Impossible - Fallout, thank you, Jim. This is your chance, as we awkwardly mumble, for you to step away from the live broadcast if you're listening via digital tape delay on iTunes or Spotify. Gosh, it sounds good to say that. Feels good to say that. Definitely skip ahead using the time index in the show notes if you have those available to you. Otherwise, spoilers are now officially fair game. Where do you guys want to start?
Oh boy, I don't know.
Jim, I think already set this up a little bit. The bathroom scene. This wasn't the first action scene in the film, but it was the one that first gave us Henry Cavill. So, and I think that was definitely a high point to the film. So, I know, Jim, you were super excited about this one. Do you want to set it up?
So we got I forget how it was even set up, but I know Henry Cavill and Tom Cruise end up in this like a big nightclub, like one of these super club restrooms, and it's like the cleanest restroom I've ever seen in a club. It's like all white, everything's clean, there's no dirt anywhere, nothing's out of place.
No pools of piss beneath any of the urinal troughs, by the way. Most unrealistic thing in this movie.
Soap on the sinks, all that stuff. But no. Anyway, they go in there, they meet up with one of the agents, I think, that they're hunting down, right? And they get him, and they get in this huge kind of like three-way fight. At one point, it became like a four-way fight, I think. And they're fighting in the bathroom, and it's highly choreographed stuff. I thought it was really, really effective. I liked there's a part where they actually go into a stall. They get the guy subdued or subconscious, and they have him sitting in the stall. And Cavill and Cruise and I'm sorry, the actor's name is escaping me at the moment, who played Lane. Will, if you can find that. But anyway, they're in there, and then they have the door of the stall closed, and these other guys come wandering in, and they notice there's 3 sets of feet in the stall, and there's movement going on and moaning, and they're like, that looks pretty interesting over there. And they come up to the door, and they're like, instead of playing it off as with like gay wisecracks or anything like that, they're like, hey guys, the more the merrier, mind if we join in? Which I thought was an interesting choice in the movie, and I applaud them for that, because I was actually kind of cringing, waiting for some homophobic shit to happen at that particular moment in time. But the movie did itself well in that scene. And then the camera switches to an overhead shot of the stall, and the guy comes back to consciousness, and this huge fight breaks out within the stall, and they're fighting in the confines of the stall. I thought that was a pretty amazing little hand-to-hand fight scene. I mean, we didn't need big helicopters, cars, motorcycles to have a really good bathroom fight scene. May not be the best bathroom fight scene I've ever seen, but it's up there.
Yeah, probably the best ever was the
Raid 2.
Well, that's up there too. What's it? the Viggo Mortensen one, and I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, that was in a bathhouse. Yeah. Eastern Promises.
Yeah. Eastern Promises. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
But no, totally. Like, I think that
that one we had naked guys fighting, and we actually saw his balls at one point, I think.
There's plenty of reasons to like a fight scene.
Right.
No, but like what's so neat about this one is it had a lot of layers to it. Like this particular fight scene had a really nice pacing for me because it starts off as sort of like a 3-person brawl. That's that moment where in the trailers you see it where Henry Cavill like he actually reloads his fists as he's walking over, like he's so ready to fight. And then you have additional people joining in between the what's her name? Was it Rebecca Ferguson? Popping into the scene and joining, and then there's a little break where they're inside the stall, and then the dudes come in, and then more fighting happens. Like there's like this stuff that kind of happens on all sides of this thing where it has like a pacing, a flow, a couple of breaks to catch your breath, and then dives back in. I thought this was one of the better sequences of this film.
And I really like that it like diffuses their magic technology in a way in this scene, right? Like the guy like wakes up in the stall as they're scanning and printing his new face or whatever, and like, you know, unfortunately they have to like, you know, beat him down with the laptop. Things get broken, like the plan goes awry, which is kind of nice to see. Like you have this cool element of the Henry Cavill character coming in, and it's obvious that like, you know, he's not used to the IMF's way of doing things. He's literally the brute force blunt instrument. And you see how that kind of fucks everything up. And so I thought it was kind of a fun, wild, chaotic element to bring in to kind of change the status quo a little bit. Of course, we're in spoilers. He ends up being one of the big bad villains of the whole movie. Duh.
Right.
But it was cool to see them kind of like working together and against each other, during the film.
And that particular fight scene was neat too, because just like what you mentioned, Brad, like you really have two different philosophies coming into that fight scene. Like we need to do things stealthily, and we need to use this technology, and we need to use our spy tactics, versus we need to go in there and bust some heads and get what we want. And that during that particular fight, there are several moments where both Cruise and Cavill's characters do exactly the thing that they set out to do, whether it be Cruise trying to do like the little mask thing and trying to be a little more surreptitious about kind of the hand washing thing that kicks off the fight, versus Cavill just sort of like taking off his shirt or his jacket and getting ready to punch things and smashing the thing to beat the guy up. Like there's a lot of show don't tell in that particular scene where we get to see their character traits not only played out based on like, you know, what we heard about them talking about earlier, but just how they interact with the environment and each other.
Yeah, just like the choreography really stood out there. And the guy who they were fighting was a decoy for this guy named Lark. And I got confused right off the bat because it was Lane and then Lark. And I'm like, why did they pick like four-letter names that begin with the same, you know, two characters? Like, are they trying to confuse me here? They shouldn't do that. But anyway, this guy who played the Lark decoy that they encountered and fought in the bathroom scene was Liang Yang, and he's basically a stunt performer. This guy, and not only that, but he's a fight coordinator on some movies like The Last Jedi, like that whole red throne room scene. Like he was the fight coordinator for that scene. So that explains why the fight choreography was so spectacular in that scene. And similarly, you had one color palette like in each scene. One was red, one was white. So pretty awesome there. It's kind of interesting to kind of tie movies together like that.
Oh, for sure. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned like, you know, the two names that kind of like sound alike. Speaking of two things that sound alike and look alike, were you guys thrown at all when we had both Michelle Monaghan and Rebecca Ferguson like switching in and out? Because I'm like, wait a second, what the fuck is going on here?
And I feel like if I had I think the film did a good enough job of once all the pieces were on the board and we had some time with them, like I could figure out what was going on. But
Right.
like when we first saw, like I completely forgot about the existence of the Moynihan character, Julia.
Yeah, Julia.
Yeah. I completely forgot like what her role was. Like, and so Rebecca Ferguson's coming in, and I'm like, oh, that's the girl that he got married to in the dream sequence at the beginning. Oh no, it's not. It was a completely different girl. Like, yeah. So there was like, I did have to reorient my brain around that. Like, so yeah, I'm right there with you.
Thank God the other female supporting actor in here, Vanessa Kirby, played a character with blonde hair, because I would have been totally fucked if she had come in another brunette. And they're all beautiful, but yeah, those two were tough to tell apart for sure. What do you guys think of the kind of the big action set piece at the end, the helicopter fight?
As action set pieces go, I mean, I think it was fine, completely unbelievable, but I mean, it was fine. Like the helicopter fucking crashes and Tom Cruise is like strapped into the front, and they do some cool things with like physics and where the camera is in comparison to how the helicopter's moving around. But I'm just like, you have all this shit flying through this windshield. You can't tell me that literally none of it impales Tom Cruise. Like, it's ridiculous.
It's impossible.
It is impossible. Yeah, we got hooks flying around and gravity and cliffs, and we've got and guess what we've got? We've got a countdown timer also.
Yes.
Of course. Right.
And I would say that, I mean, that's for this type of film and this type of genre, that's definitely a feature, not a bug. Like, like if the heroes aren't like saving the world with like seconds left to spare, like it's not this genre, right? Like that's, if it was just sort of like, if we don't accomplish this mission sometime in the next 3 months, like four people may get sick. Like, it's like, it's got to be big stakes, and it's got to be like down to the wire. Because I think that's what makes, that gets that white knuckle, that adrenaline pumping, that, and it's very improbable. It's so over the top, and it's so manufactured for this type of film. But again, it's kind of what this type of film's for. It's just, it's just big explosions and fun action, and they're going to make it through okay, because if they didn't, like, again, it wouldn't be this type of genre. Like, don't get me wrong, I would love to see maybe the end of this franchise, let's say when it's done, Mission Impossible 8, okay? They all sign on to do it, and the movie is like a YouTube short, because like the explosion at the beginning, like Tom Cruise just buffs it, and like they die like 3 minutes into the movie. Like that should be Mission Impossible 8. Just like they fuck up during the opening sequence, and they're just like, well, I guess that's it.
I don't think they had enough face ripoffs in this movie. Like they needed more.
He said sarcastically.
Kind of. Like, I think it would be awesome if they had even more face ripoffs. Like if in every scene you kind of expected that somebody was gonna, whoosh, oh, I'm not really this guy, I'm this person.
Mm-hmm. Bear with me. I know I mentioned like what I want for Mission Impossible 8. Let me tell you what I want for Mission Impossible 7. A very opening scene, like Tom Cruise is doing this like stunt where it's just like, will he, won't he? And like they think he's dead, but then he like comes back over the edge and he's like, oh my God, he survived. Then they go off and they do their adventure and they stop the terrorists and the explosion and blah, 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 blah. And at the very end of the movie, he pulls off his mask and you find out that Tom Cruise died at the beginning of the movie and it's been some other guy this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been Jeremy Renner. It's been Jeremy Renner the whole time.
Who we thought has disappeared from movies, but no.
Yeah. It's literally Hawkeye.
Speaking of disappearing from movies, kind of sad to see Alec Baldwin's run in these movies come to an end.
I don't know that he's dead though. Like he'll pop up in Mission Impossible 12 after like being operating in the underground, over there for 10 years. It was all a setup to get him in place. come on, nobody stays dead in these movies.
I guess.
This passes the torch over to Angela Bassett's character, who I think is now going to be sort of in that role for the IMF, kind of, sort of going forward.
Yeah, till she rips her face off and is
Ving Rhames.
Ving Rhames? No.
Stephen
Kevin Hart?
No,
Doc. You don't want to see Kevin Hart.
The Rock. The Rock. The Rock. It's gotta be The Rock.
Okay, The Rock.
Oh my God. Angela Bassett, this tiny woman, pulls her face off and suddenly morphs into a giant rock. That would be amazing.
And he's still standing there wearing like that, like whatever, like, you know, petite business suit she was wearing, like handbag and like lipstick and all. Like,
although her demeanor is kind of like The Rock. Like she has that very authoritative, like you'll do what I say kind of voice. So it could work. Could work.
Yeah.
Okay. Christopher McQuarrie.
We fan fiction like all over this thing.
Well, guys, any final thoughts on Mission Impossible Fallout?
I do want to say, like, this was a movie that was almost made for, and I didn't see it in IMAX, but this was a film that was probably made for IMAX. So if you happen to have an IMAX or even a LIMAX, you know, one of the kind of the pseudo IMAX theaters near you, I think this is a good one to see in that particular format.
Just not with your movie pass.
Just not with your movie pass, unless, you know, is IMAX only AMC?
I don't know.
Oh, no, it's not.
Yeah, no. So you can still see it with your movie pass.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I thought movie pass didn't let you see IMAX films.
Oh, you're right. Like, yeah, that's right. I think there might.
Well, that was this week. That was this week. 2 weeks ago, I think it was okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Hey guys, we've got a live comment in the chat from Easton Murray. Hey Easton, he says, "Hey, loving the show."
Hey,
Surma dogs.
Was that Huck?
No, that was Ginger.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounded like a ginger bar.
A bigger dog.
One of the big girls. Yeah.
Well, Jim, any other thoughts on Mission Impossible before we wrap up Mission Impossible?
No, I mean, like I said, just I enjoyed it. Not sure I'll ever go back and revisit it because we have another one coming along that'll be just kind of more of the same.
The real question is, will Michelle Moynihan show up in the next movie with Rebecca Ferguson as Elsa? Are they going to like pair up and be a new spy team independent of Tom Cruise and his gang?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know if I could take it.
Their little super spy team is getting bigger and bigger with each movie. Like, I mean, it's, dare I say it, this is sort of a superhero franchise at this point, right?
Kind of.
It sure is. A spy superhero team. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and let the Mission Impossible franchise rest for a couple of years until the next one of these comes out and switch gears a little bit away from talking about a big, huge, giant action movie and talking about a little quiet, awkward teen girl coming of age story. I don't know that we could have picked two more dichotomous like films, but we did. So we're going to be discussing A24's 8th Grade. And as I mentioned before, just in case you weren't listening, that happens sometimes, we'll talk about 8th Grade spoiler free for probably 10 minutes or so. If you're not sure about seeing the film or you don't even know what it is, which is fair, we're going to tell you all about it and maybe encourage you one way or the other. So stick with us, and then we'll give you a fair warning before we open up spoilers. So all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of 8th Grade. All right. So, Will, I do believe this was a film that you plugged once upon a time on the show, so it seems fitting that maybe you kick this off for us, because this is a more little-known film than, say, Mission Impossible Fallout. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, this movie? Is it worth seeing? Is it worth skipping? Just, of course, protect our listeners from spoilers until we get there.
What's it about? Is it about 8th grade?
It is about 8th grade.
But does it, wait a second, does it take place in 8th grade?
No, so this is 8th grade is a coming of age comedy / drama, more on the comedy side, but it definitely has some, some heavy emotional beats at points. Written and directed by Bo Burnham. This is his debut directorial feature. This is a dude who really got his start kind of doing like a lot of like stand-up comedy and kind of like working through through other platforms, YouTube primarily. He came up on, he was found first on YouTube, so he knows this very well. This movie is about this introverted 8th grader, and it's her like last week of 8th grade. She doesn't feel like she connects as well with all of the other kids. She thinks she's got this outgoing personality, even though she's recently been voted most quiet in the class. But she's got this last week of 8th grade, and she decides to use this opportunity to sort of fix a few things about herself, and I use air quotes for the fix, and to try to put herself out there a little bit more, and in some places comedic, some places disastrous results. This is an absolutely wonderful, gorgeous, very truthful movie in that I think that there's this clumsy awkwardness that a lot of us went through sort of around that age. We're not quite in like high school. We're not quite, sort of in that like too cool for school age, but we're not kids anymore. We're in that very in-between ground. We want to be adults, but we're not quite there yet. We want to still cling on to some of the things that we enjoyed as children, but we're embarrassed to. We want to be liked, and when we aren't, it feels particularly devastating because it feels like every single one of those rejections is just going to let us down and tear our entire world apart. This movie encapsulates all of that so brilliantly. It's rated R, and that's actually a travesty because it's rated R only because of some slightly strong language. I think something to the equivalent of like 4 or 5 like F-bombs from the teenagers, and a couple of discussions of sexuality that from the from the kids' perspectives, kind of their interpretations of what it would be like. Nothing too graphic, nothing too vulgar, anything like that. So I say that because I think this is actually a wonderful movie for parents to probably take an 8th grader to, despite the R rating, because I think that it would help both of them find some common ground in terms of what that experience is like, and probably help strengthen their relationship while also helping the kid while they're in this weird period of transition, kind of bridging to the next step. 8th grade is an absolutely darling movie. It might be my favorite coming of age story of the year. Definitely worth watching. Go see it immediately. In fact, I think it might be tonight, so maybe it's too late. But I know this week A24 is doing a big push because of the rated R thing. They went to every state where the rating R is just considered a suggestion and not like a thing that has to be enforced by the theaters. And they purchased like full screenings, so basically free screenings, so that parents could take their 8th graders or teenagers could go see it. And I honestly think that's tonight, but I think it's a great thing that A24 is doing because I think this age group does need to see this movie. But that's just me.
That's awesome. And yeah, Will, I have to chime in here with you in the positive as well. This is something that I think was at South by that I did not get to see. And so we've just kind of been waiting for it to pop up here to where we could access it. And finally it did. And I'm so glad that it did. Jim and I were having a discussion coming out of this movie, and we're going to unpack a lot of the great stuff about the film and spoilers. So I'll use my time for a quick aside. Jim asked me, what did you think about the film? And I told him the film really did 2 things. One, it sort of like brought back a lot of really unhappy memories about how like shy and awkward I used to be and how much trouble I had, even just like speaking to a person I didn't know. Like I'd be struck, mute anytime like an attractive guy, for instance, would try to talk to me. Even if I knew he was super into me, I'd be like, well, he's so hot, I can't talk to him. But the second thing that it did, even though it brought up all these bad memories of how I used to be, it really reminded me of how far I've come. In that time since 8th grade myself. And it's really made me appreciate a lot of the growing that I've done. And it put me in a very reflective mood. I mean, it's been a couple of days now since we've seen the film, and I still keep like thinking back to that. And I notice things about myself. Like Jim can tell you, when I start feeling anxious, I start snapping at people. Well, you probably remember my great instance of that where I got lost in downtown Austin trying to find you guys. I know.
Lead the
yeah. But it's just sort of like my natural response. And so seeing the Kayla character in this film do the exact same thing to her dad, somebody that she like loves, like really cemented for me like the craziness that like anxiety can have in terms of effect. So I think this is a really great film, even if maybe it does dredge up some unpleasant self-reflection. I think it's definitely worth seeing. Also too, guys, it has reinvigorated my desire to like try and utilize Instagram and Snapchat, because I gotta tell you, like, this movie makes really great use of technology, like just keying you into how people use their phones today and what they're doing on social media. And like, at one point, one character, and it's in the trailer, it's like, we don't use Facebook for events anymore. Wow, you're crazy, mom. Like, and it's kind of like, oh,
I'm
right.
like, wait, I still use
Facebook for events. Like, so it's kind of interesting, but yeah, definitely go see this one. I don't know how long it's going to be around because it is a smaller film because of the R rating. I mean, we had like what, Jim, like 10 people in our theater for this movie, and it was in like the smallest theater.
It was in the smallest theater, but there were more people than that in there. It wasn't full by any means, though.
Yeah. It was a small crowd, but Jim, where do you come down on this film? So two big recommends at this point. How about for you?
Yeah, it's a love fest. I really like this film a lot. So far up my alley. This is a character study of the main character, Kayla, of course. But astonishingly, one of the characters I really enjoyed was the dad. To see him, how he was struggling to raise his daughter. It's not really talked much about, but it's just him and the daughter. It's a two-hander. There really isn't anything to spoil there. And how he's struggling at being a dad to this girl who's going through a lot of changes. She's under a lot of pressure to kind of find herself. She's feeling out of place and awkward, and he's trying to do the right thing and reassure her, and always seems to kind of step in the wrong direction. But he's really not. He's really being a great dad, but he's not getting that feedback. So it's a strange situation where you're really rooting for both characters, to succeed. And we'll talk about how that actually goes, at the end of the movie. But yeah, I love this movie for that reason alone, because, I'm a dad who I didn't bring up a daughter on my own. I was married at the time, so there were two parents bringing her up, but I can see some of my daughter in this girl, Kayla, how she behaves to people, how she has these outbursts when she's trying to fit in and feeling awkward at social gatherings, and you're rooting for her because she's doing the right thing. She's a good kid at heart. She, and she's trying. She's not just going into her shell and like, blocking out the world. And she's taking the steps that she needs to grow. And at every corner she turns, you're rooting for her as well. So I really loved it. I was just reading about the director a little bit, Bo Burnham. He apparently is from a town that I lived in, and that my my ex-wife is from, actually.
Oh, wow.
And I saw the name and I'm like, Burnham. Oh, there's a Burnham's restaurant. I wonder. So we have a lot to talk about with Marsha when she comes over later this week, babe. And he's fairly young too. I think this guy is really young. He's born in '90, so he's like less than 30 years
28
old
right now. Yeah.
Wow, that's astounding that somebody who's 28, made a movie with this much, grace and character work is fantastic in this. And if you think this movie is a typical coming of age movie, it's not. It's amazing how many times I can go to the movies and see a coming of age movie and have it be like a totally different experience for me. And this movie was that. They did some pretty inventive things, cinematography, just cinematically, I guess, in this movie, with sound and with the way they shot certain scenes. It wasn't just your straight like after school special kind of 8th grade girl movie, and that kept it very interesting all the way through also. So yeah, I really love this movie.
It's so neat with Bo Burnham. So like, again, this is this dude who like, he was one of the success stories from YouTube. Like, that's what he did. He was a guy that put content on YouTube, and then it turned into Comedy Central, their record branch, giving him a record deal so that he could make like a comedy album. So this dude is like 28 right now. He understands like the social media elements, which I think are so key to this film. But so when I saw this movie, I got to watch a QA with him talking about it, and he had like all the young actors out there. And one of the things that impressed me most about it is, for such a young guy, he was remarkably conscientious of the fact that he was trying to tell a story about what it's like to be a 13-year-old girl, and he made sure to work with the females on set, as well as with the actresses, to make sure that everything that was being presented was authentic and not like a late 20-year-old dude's idea of what it might have been like to have been a middle school girl. And I think that's that degree of empathy and that degree of understanding that, like, when you're writing for a character who has different experiences from yourself, you have to make sure that you're not injecting too much of yourself in them, that you're definitely reflecting those accurate worldviews. I think that's remarkable vision for a guy. This is his first film and he's under 30. Like, I'm looking forward to what he has next because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say that, and this maybe we'll have to get into this in spoilers, but I'll leave that for spoilers. But one other thing I will mention is this movie had a few scenes that were more tension filled and horrifying than anything in any Mission Impossible movie. Like, it was like I'm going into these scenes and I'm like, oh my God, like, I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm kind of afraid what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm like holding my breath at every word from the character. So and we'll talk about them a little bit in spoilers, but that's pretty astounding that a film like this can bring you through all of those feelings and emotions.
Absolutely agreed. And I think, honestly, guys, now's a great point to transition anyway. I think we can keep love festing on the movie in general vague terms, but I think we've gotten the point home that we love this. We hope you love this. So definitely go out and see it. But we are going to go ahead and rip off the Band-Aid and make spoilers fair game here in just a few moments. So step away if you need to. Come back in 10 or 15 minutes. Otherwise, use your show notes, skip ahead if you're listening on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify. Guys, spoilers are totally open. And Jim, let's start with one of those scary scenes. So after Olivia and her friends, they're in the car with Kayla, and they drop Olivia off first. Right. Olivia is now gone. Olivia is this mentor character from high school. Now it's just Kayla and the boy. When he stopped that car and got in the back seat with her, holy shit. Like, that tension just ratcheted up to like 20 in like less than a second.
Right. Because you're thinking all of the things that could go haywire here, right? In one aspect, you're thinking, oh, these are only kids. you know, what could really happen. But then you think, hey, these are kids kind of on the verge of adulthood, so anything can happen. We don't know what's in that boy's mind. We're put in the position of kind of hoping and praying and rooting for our character to kind of do the right thing, which would have been like stand up and say like, no, this is not happening. And eventually she did. She said like, no, I'm not, that's not what I'm doing. So regardless of the consequences, which was basically just a butthurt kid driving her home. And also the consequences of, hey, she had a great time. This was the first time in maybe forever that she's maybe felt part of a group with some friends, and they're cool and they're hanging out in the mall and she's feeling like she fits in. And then this happens and it could totally wreck the whole thing for her and send her like, you know, 2 steps forward, 10 steps back kind of thing. And so that's another reason for the tension. Like you just don't see a great outcome from that thing. I thought that tension was really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks to part of the brilliance of the script here, in that this was a film that I've seen a lot of films that are like this, that rely on tension based on casting someone as a very obvious villain, and not just an antagonist, but as an obvious villain. And I, you know, obviously the other kid in that particular scenario was not doing the right thing, and so that's not good. But I think that could have gone. I think with a less deft script, I think that could have gone to some darker and probably more heavy-handed places than it did. And I think as it was, it created a really interesting scenario for Kayla. Also, the high school girls that they just got done hanging out with. Like, I was waiting the entire movie for just like those girls to sort of mean girl her, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that they didn't, it was like, wow, like, you know, there were, you know, they created like those were, you know, she actually made a friend, actually a set of friends who are older than her and who didn't have malice in their heart. So yeah, obviously the proposition in the back of the car, very, very uncomfortable, made me squirm in my seat. I was absolutely like terrified for what the next 10 minutes of that movie would be. It was still an uncomfortable thing. I'm glad they didn't go to the heavy, dark places. And I'm glad that they didn't just make a bunch of mustache twirling, like evil kids for Kayla to have to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't like a Jason Bateman, like evils of social networking technology movie, right? Like there's no like, nude picture of Kayla gets posted online and the whole school reacts to it. Like, you know, I was glad to see that the main villain of this movie was kind of Kayla herself in a lot of ways. And I think that's so true to life sometimes. Like sometimes we really are, to use a cliche, our own worst enemy. But it was interesting to see some of the different ways she was trying to like work through those things about herself, like doing the videos, right? Hi, this is Kayla again. Here's a video on how to be yourself. It's almost like she was, you know, she's using the creation of these videos to try to like practice whatever those skills are. It's almost like the videos are a mechanism for convincing herself that she
her
has
own
this
reinforcement.
ability.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I, you know, that's definitely something that I've done in the past with my own writing when I was up and coming in school and stuff. It did uncomfortably remind me of the very first episode of the Movie Bears podcast, though. And I'm like, hi, everybody. This is Brad Harris of Movie Bears podcast. I like to think that we've come a long way since then, but
I do too.
Yeah. In another, you know, another movie would have taken some of these situations and kind of cranked them up beyond where they needed to be to tell a true story. Like you said, they would have gone down the mean girls path, right? Oh, she's paired up with this nice high school girl. Well, this nice high school girl is going to like, you know, smear her and cause her all kinds of hardships.
Blood on her. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you know, something at the pool party when she shows up. She's the only girl there wearing like a one-piece kind of like one-piece kids style bathing suit, and all the other girls there have basically have bikinis on, and they all have, you know, they're all like thinner than her, and so you can, again, this movie made you feel like the what she was going through, like, oh, she feels a little out of place here, and the girl opens her gift and she gives her a nice gift of a game, right? And it's like the faces on the girl was a little crazy. How did you guys feel at the end of the movie when she confronts the girl from the party and says, "Hey, you you know, I gave you a nice game and you didn't even say thank you, and you're not nice, and you know, when people do nice things for you, you have to be nicer." Did that, for me, that felt like the movie was trying to make a statement beyond those two characters. It just felt like, in this day and age with what's going on in social media and stuff, it's maybe advice that we all kind of have to take to heart. You know what I mean? And she was kind of the messenger a little bit. That's the way I kind of took it.
I took it that way too, and I think it's a good message. I just wish that like she had looked at the character while she's like talking to her about it. Like she's just looking at the floor, like, you're a really bad person, like blah, 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 blah. And the other thing was, if I have one complaint about the movie, it's probably that moment, because that felt a little tacked on for me. And that felt a little outside, like Kayla's capabilities at that point. Like I didn't feel like all of a sudden she had this like epiphany of personality where she would really feel compelled to go do this. Like maybe she would have written her another letter or something. And I don't know. It felt a little incongruous with the rest of what we saw, but it was an important message. Absolutely.
I think why it kind of worked for me was that it is because of that, like looking down and looking away. Like this isn't a character who just had oodles of confidence all of a sudden, but this is a character who during this last week has made some friends, learned how to be able to kind of step outside of herself, learned how to take herself out of an uncomfortable situation, learned how to let go of some of her expectations of the past through like the box that she and her father burn and kind of all of that. You know, like this is a character who during this week, these aren't monumental changes. Like this isn't, because this isn't that type of movie. But this is a character who came out of these different circumstances a little more ready for the next thing. And so I think in this case, this was the equivalent of burning the box for her. She wasn't ready to kind of own herself in her own skin completely, but I think she had to burn this particular box, this thing that was this like albatross hanging around her neck, just how badly she felt when this girl wasn't even outright mean to her as much as like she was disinterested in her. And I think that like at that age, that's just as bad. And I think that what this has done is this sets up Kayla to, as we kind of hear in her closing monologue, like she's a little more ready for the next thing. And she's a little more ready to know that like whatever kind of comes, whatever her expectations of the next thing are, it's going to be okay. And so I think that's where it worked for me, not because of the actual confrontation itself, but just where it showed this character sort of closing some of these boxes so that she could be ready for the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one more thing I do want to mention, I know we're long and we're going to wrap up soon, but I did kind of like the whole, the concept that they introduced at the end of like the time capsule and kind of the message from your younger self to your older self. I thought it was done really well. And it's not something that this movie invented, obviously, but I thought it was done really well in this movie. And they took it even like a half a step further and had her, I think the end of the movie was her monologue to her high school graduating self. Right. About, you know, and she's kind of reinforcing herself, reinforcing these ideas for herself as she enters high school. And it tells the audience, I think, that, you know, she's obviously going to be okay. She's going to be, you know, she's going to make it.
In the lobby of the movie theater where I saw it, they actually have a box where it was like it was a thing where you could send a message to your 8th grade self, like, you know, like if you could give your 8th grade self like, so you could put the little piece of paper in the box. And I think that like A24 was going to take some of those and like put them on their social media as part of the, you know, as part of, so I would obviously not put in anything in there, like, you know, too scandalous, but like, I think that that's a pretty cool idea.
Guess what? You're gay.
Yeah. Well, we do have these little like epochs of our lives, you know, and that's not the exact term for it, but you know, like we have these like these pivot points, you know, like this you know, school is very easy because it's like it's marked by grade and by which school you're in.
It's usually only a few years at a time.
And then after you have like your education, your career, and where you moved and the relationships you're with, and all of these are these little time periods. And I think at any given moment, we're always thinking back to the human beings that we were at some of these different time periods in the past, as well as the human beings that we're going to be in some of these time periods going forward. And just, I think that degree of self-reflection that the movie inspires in someone makes this to where it's not just a great film for kids who are currently in 8th grade, although it absolutely is, but even for adults who are sort of thinking back towards all of those little moments of their lives and how they shape themselves. I think this is a remarkably relatable film.
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm thinking of at least 8 people right now that I want to like go see this movie with, because I know lots of adults, I think, who are struggling with the same things as the Kayla character, even though they're 40 years old, 45 years old, 30 years old. Like, you know, I'm watching Kayla and how much she's struggling and how much she overthinks things that are said to her, or, you know, like we know so many people like that. Jim, you're nodding your head. I'm betting you have at least one of the people I'm thinking of in mind. And I think this movie is cathartic in a way. You know, even for me, I still struggle with some things. Like, it's so great to see this character going through all this stuff. And, you know, there isn't an easy answer. You can't just graduate 8th grade and magically you're a totally together, like with it, super amazing in all aspects of your life person. Like, this is kind of a lifelong journey. And so, you know, like I mentioned earlier, it introduced some harsh self-reflection for me on one hand, but on the other, it just made me thankful for like all of the steps that I have made. But it reminds me, everybody's got shit to work on and probably will need to work on it for the rest of your life. But it's taking strides to do that versus letting yourself be stuck in it. I think that makes the difference. And, you know, talking through that, that moment with Kayla at the end, maybe that was sort of her like throwing her cap over the wall so that she'd have to go and get it and force herself to kind of move forward a little bit. So I can appreciate where you're coming from on that.
I think before we close out this particular film, there's one thing that I'd be remarkably interested in hearing from both of you. I want to hear your best Gucci.
All right, me first.
I was gonna save it for the end, but we can do it now. All right,
great minds think alike.
Gucci.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Gucci. All right, well.
Gucci. Yeah, this is so much fun, right?
Oh goodness!
I read funny. A thing someone had written that was like, I think a good encapsulation of just how silly that particular sign off is. I think it was something to the effect of, the first Gucci made me roll my eyes, the last one made me cry. Like, and that's a very good like arc for this film, right?
Yeah. It's one of those that like into the movie. It's all those videos and stuff to get through and you know, to get on board with where this character's going. Once the story's good, it was great.
All right, we're gonna pause for just a second. Babe, your audio and video just totally dumped all over the screen. You sounded like a robot.
All right, well, yours sounds that way right now.
Yeah, you guys both sound like robots. Yeah. You know what's funny is we were just like, oh man, let's hope we don't get any audio issues to the episode. I guess it's fitting if we're gonna get them at all. It's right here at the end.
Okay. Are you there, babe?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
You guys are both like robots, still screen, still frame things.
Through all those, we can do our song.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and since we're here at the end, I'm just going to grab the baton real quick and close us out. I want to thank everyone who's listening to us live in the chat, Jordan and Ronald and Bobby and Easton for joining us today. I think that one of our favorite things about doing this live is we get to chat with you all while we're talking about these things, and it just like it lights a fire under my ass every week when like you guys are giving us so much good stuff to work with. I want to remind everyone that you can find us through several different social media channels. Follow us on Facebook, Movie Bears Podcast, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, and as Brad mentioned at the beginning of the show, look for us on Spotify. You can also find each individual cast member through our various different Twitter handles. I won't go through all of our social media platforms, but you can find me at Whatever Cove. Brad is at iBradPro, and Jim is at JJP Out West. And of course, we are MB Podcast on Twitter as well. This was a heck of a show, a Mission Impossible 8th grade show. I don't know what we've got going on next week. We'll let you all know which film we're going to be talking about. Maybe a shark movie, maybe not. I think the bag might be on deck. But with that, closing us out. Good night.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Will.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Gucci.
Gucci.